everyone. It is time to head north. I'm Natasha Ryan, your host and VP of Communications for the North Group. So excited to have Alan Saquella and BJ Zapor here with me today. Alan is a full-time professor at Embry-Riddle, former CSO, and we have BJ, who is the CEO of 3 Delta Consulting, and he teaches at Arizona State. So I have two people shaping young minds with me today, and we'll get into that topic. But please do me a favor. We'll start with Alan. If you want to give a little bit of background, maybe that I missed, that would be fantastic.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, like so many people, I started in the public sector. I was in there for 5 years, was injured on a job, went to polygraph school and gave lie detectors. Ultimately, went to the corporate sector, and it was just purely by accident. And I found myself spending more than 30 years in the corporate sector, last as a director of corporate security investigations. And now I find myself teaching, giving back to the next generation of security intelligence investigators. And that's why I'm here.
I love it. BJ?
Well, I spent the majority of my professional career as a federal agent. I was 26 years dealing with violent crime and terrorism. I like to say that I'm in the human evil business or industry. After I retired from the occupation, I went into corporate security and healthcare, and then also teaching at the collegiate level. And then I started my consulting business, and I'm still doing a mix of all three currently. Most of my engagements deal with workplace violence and threat mitigation.
Nice. Well, thank you both so much for spending time with me here today on a topic that I think is going to be pretty important to discuss. So with that, let's jump right in. I have Alan and BJ here today because I found oftentimes when we discuss private security, the sector itself and corporate security, it isn't really seen as a destination right out of college. It's kind of an avenue that people go through post law enforcement, post military. So the first question I have to both of you, and maybe we'll start with BJ, is what do you think is the missing link here in recruiting more young professionals right into the private security sector?
Well, I think there's a number of things happening in the United States culturally, socially, and then internationally as well that create some confusion in this. The traditional path, I would say, towards security was a lot of foreign law enforcement would go into this field in various aspects, whatever. But now you have, of course, the cyber world, which is incredibly important. And there's a fusion between physical security, cybersecurity, and then, of course, what's most important is being proactive and the pre-study of threats. Threats can be financial, trademark, property, intellectual property, physical threats, workplace violence, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't think traditionally it has been something that would be sort of a post-college vocation, because it was oftentimes where people would come out of the military or law enforcement and sort of fill these roles and get into it. The technology and the services themselves have really been developed in the corporate private sector in the last 50 years. It's new to our country, really, in a way. The threat matrix is changing continually. It goes from the physical into the cyber, into the black web, and back out into the physical again. And then on top of all that, I'll just leave it with this, in that generally there's a current disdain for things like law enforcement and security because of the cultural things that have happened in the United States in the last 5 years. So overall, there's a difficulty of having people interested in that work. And there's some things I would say about that later, but that's a challenge currently as well.
Alan?
Yeah, I would agree with BJ. Traditionally, people came from military and law enforcement. What I found very interesting coming here to Embry-Riddle, all the folks or students that come here, even as freshmen, have no idea there's even a career path in the corporate or private sector. Part of that goes to, you can thank Hollywood for that. If you go into any movie, television show, Netflix, what have you, how many shows do you see are on security, the corporate sector? It's always the public sector, right? So they don't even know it exists. So I think we have to, and you might get into this in your discussion, how do we educate those coming up in the ranks through elementary school all the way through college, that there is a career path? I'm counseling people, students, every day. Well, I didn't know that existed. law enforcement, military people, they know it exists, so that it's a natural transition for them. So we do have to do a better job publicizing where the jobs are, but we have to get it early. This has just been a reoccurring thing my whole career. I've been reaching out to different universities and trying to recruit for years and trying to educate these young people on those careers that they never knew existed.
Who do you think that falls on to do the reach out and the education?
Well, I would say everybody. I mean, if you think about it, it starts with the parents, starts at the home. I think, and then it's basically as us, as leaders, as professionals. I think we need to go back to our alma maters, and we need to do presentations and start educating, and maybe go into the classroom when you do the parent teacher thing, and tell them about these careers that are out there that nobody knows exists.
So I want to touch on the human side of who we bring into the industry, because as anyone that's in it is aware, much like law enforcement and military, sometimes you deal with really hard things that are unsettling for most people. So who is the right candidate to come into the security industry? What kind of attributes do you look for in a person that could be successful? Alan, do you want to go first, and then we'll go
Sure.
to BJ?
Yeah. Well, I think when you look at the corporate security sector, and if you look across industries, they're all so different, right? A lot of it would depend, but like any profession, you need to have a communication skill set. You got to be able to collaborate. You got to have the basic skills that we all want, right? But in the corporate sector, you're not going to deal with a lot of the violence type stuff that you might deal with on the street. So your skill sets may be a little different. Like some of the students that we're putting out today are financial accounting and fraud examining investigators. So they're dealing with financial crimes. They may not need the same skill set as someone who's going to be dealing with workplace violence and active shooter response. So I think they're going to have some core competencies for sure. Communications, collaboration, being able to work in teams and communicate. But some of the other stuff will depend on what area in security they're going to focus on, whether it be GSOC operations, intelligence, financial investigations, workplace violence. And I'll let BJ add, because he comes more from the more workplace violence side of the house.
You know, there's a couple interesting things that are happening. I've observed, I would say, in the last 10 years. One is, even besides the cultural shift, and I had to speak towards the attraction of law enforcement. You know, at one time in this country, if you had a major municipal police department that was recruiting, you'd have thousands of applicants. You'd have thousands of people trying out. And they were very popular jobs and hard to get. And the same with the federal agencies, particularly agencies that employ federal agents, special agents, armed badged investigators. The changes that have happened in the sort of anti-law enforcement dialogue in a few years have obviously made a big impact on that. But another layer of shift that I've observed, and this is applicable to any field in threat management, which essentially is what security is, wherever it comes from. It's either going to a bottom line, profitability, employee safety, et cetera, is, you know, you kind of have the, I would call it the CSI factor, where, you know, younger people are watching television and they're seeing all these beautiful people working in these awesome, well-lit environments, and they're all wearing tight clothes, and they're all being super sleuthy and doing all this kind of stuff. And they're looking in these databases that have this unbelievable access to information about somebody's parents dying in a car accident 30 years ago, things that don't really exist. And they sort of get a false pretense about what this work is. And I've seen that with, and particularly undergraduates, and where their interests have transferred over the years away from it. In reality, most of the work is incredibly dirty, dangerous. It's hands-on, it's visceral. And then you go to the thing, which was the original part of your question, the exposure to this. And, you know, there's a transition that happens when people go into the field, whether it's law enforcement. Of course, there's a lot of variance in law enforcement as well, just like there would be security. But it's the exposure, I would say, behind the curtain. I sort of attribute that to the Wizard of Oz, right? I mean, that's a great fable of people that are seeking three things that ultimately they had themselves. They had courage, they had love, they had intelligence, they had it themselves. They went through this Homer's Odyssey to get to the wizard. They looked behind the curtain, it was just a guy turning gears. And that's very much what the exposure that security in law enforcement, public safety gives a person and the effect on their life is they're looking behind the curtains of society. They're looking behind the curtains of an organization, and they find out very quickly the things that are on the other side, the offstage aspects of this world. And it can have a demonstrative impact on one's emotional and mental health and their outlook. One of the outcomes of that is cynicism and fear and stress, PTSD, all those kind of things. A lot of people are, there's really no way to prepare somebody for that other than the experience of exposure. And then the treatment of the exposure, the ability to talk about it amongst their peers and around professionals. And so I think that in terms of classes that are vocational in nature, right? Actual, say, classes at a community college or undergraduate classes in a university that are they're very honest and transparent, hands-on about, say, what an investigation entails and whatever it is, or what victimization means in reality in this country, whether people are being defrauded out of their entire life savings or if somebody's being murdered. And so exposure and honesty, I think, is one thing that would compel people towards this work, but it's also majorly depend on what our cultural values are. Unfortunately, we're trending still away from these cultural values, but history demonstrates it's a pendulum, and eventually it'll start swinging the other way back, and there'll be more interest in this dedication.
Do you think it would be helpful to market? Because I know, as you just said, it comes with the strife, right? But do you think it would be helpful to go back to like the old school way of marketing this, is like you actually have a chance to make a real impact in people's lives? Like a lot of the security work is life safety, like workplace violence. I mean, even if you're corporate security, you still are there to ensure people stay alive and stay safe in the Fortune 500 office building. I mean, do you think that message needs to be more inherent, or do people get that and they just don't care? Like, do you think that would appeal to this younger generation at all?
I do, because unlike, I would say, others, contemporaries of mine, I love this young generation. They have a level of inclusiveness and sensitivity and intelligence that I didn't experience on my own. I mean, there's some other things that maybe are missing, but they make up for in these other virtues, I think. And that's something that we should be exploiting. I know that's an adjective that people don't like, but there is an altruistic sense to it as well. And, studies show that people are attracted to this work. You have people that they really want to help. They want to be of service. They have that motivation. You have others that are doing it because they need a job. And then thirdly, you have people, and I would say, and hopefully in a smaller majority, and also detected and refuted through good hiring practices and good background investigations, are people that are doing it for power or for some other nefarious purpose. And so if the other two are the majority of what compels somebody to do this, you're right. I think the proper type of marketing could maybe instigate some of those thoughts and desires for people that are figuring out what in the hell they're going to do with their life when they're 22 years old. So, yes.
Alan?
For sure. I would also say that one of the things that we found that works, that makes or helps get students interested, is mentorship programs. So getting them aligned with someone in the field, having regular reoccurring video calls or conference calls with them. Of course, the American Society for Industrial Security had a program for mentorships for college students with a professional. Get them some exposure, drive by, a drive along, side by side, spend a day in the life of a GSOC operator or a field investigator for an insurance company, whatever it may be. Find out what you like and what you don't like, because what you don't like is as important as what you do like. Again, I think it goes back to, at least from the students that I'm seeing, is they don't even know this thing exists. They don't know this career path exists. So I think the marketing certainly needs to improve on many fronts.
No, I read your article. So Alan published an article on the value and importance of mentoring. And one of the things that, I've run into trying to connect people is, how do you not only convey the importance of mentorship to the mentee, but also the mentor? Because a lot of these C-suite security level, these executives don't either have the time or don't want to take the time necessarily. It's not a dig. It's just we all have priorities in our lives and families and careers, right? So how do you appeal to the CSOs on, hey, if you take the time, you're helping to bring your replacement one day when you retire into the mix?
I will tell you this. We owe it to our future. We're talking 1 hour a month, 12 hours a year in the typical mentorship relationship. If and my feeling and my message to my former peers is, if you don't have time, go find something else to do. I mean, we have to do it. We owe it to the next generation. Like BJ said, this Generation Z, whatever they call it, Generation Z, I'm motivated by these kids because they look at the generation before them and they're saying, I don't want to be like a millennial. I want to get out there. I want to work. I want to differentiate myself. So I'm excited about this next generation that's in college right now.
I love internships. It's from what Alan just said is, internships are so incredibly powerful, and we had them in the federal government. I was an intern. I was just really, really lucky. My last semester in undergraduate, I was a full-time intern with the U.S. Secret Service, which was an incredible experience. Then got me information I would have never had trying to come from the outside and figure out how to start and get into that career and how to become an agent. But it was incredible. It was an incredible experience. I had like 2 other teammates on my football team. We had all applied for this internship at the same time. Luckily, they were criminals and couldn't pass the background, and so I got it. But the internship, a lot of schools have a capstone experience. They have a field study experience, and it's great to have those where you can get somebody that is. They go through the background, they sign indemnification, which takes the liability and the risk off of the organization of having them there. They sign a NDA, just the typical things. They get tremendous exposure in vocational that goes, really they go back and then they write a paper to their school that tells other students how to have this opportunity. And they don't really happen as much, I see, in the corporate world because there's much more concerns about liability and workman's comp and all this, sort of the state labor law things. But it's a great opportunity for somebody, especially if they're receiving college credit and exposure to an industry. I think that's powerful. Great opportunity.
I posed the question, but I'll pipe in here too. I think this generation has such an expectation of responsibility for good, and culturally, they expect more from the people who own businesses down to the restaurants they eat at. I mean, across the board, I think it's a great generation to appeal to. I'm curious, those that do seem interested in exploring a corporate security or private security career, what is their specific line of interest? Have you noticed a trend towards maybe cyber, AI related topics? What are you seeing?
Who are you directing that to?
Well, I mean, who wants to go first? Alan, you go.
Okay. Yeah, it's pretty much across the board because here at the university, we have kids that come in here with cyber interests. Some come in specifically to be financial accounting and fraud examiners. So the ones that are going into the private or corporate sector have that interest. We do have those who want to go government. So like BJ mentioned, internships are amazing, great experiences. But there's just not enough of them because to what BJ mentioned, there's some liability issues. Companies don't want to bring these people on. So there may only be 15 to 20% of our students that get those opportunities. So, but the interests do vary. And at least at our university, they come in with an idea of where they might want to go.
BJ?
Yeah. And I think, a partnerships with universities are always a great thing with the HR department. Like, so for example, I'm thinking in a corporate security director role, for example, if that person was to partner with their HR and say, hey, look, let's get a relationship going with, a couple schools that are here in town or whatever, and sort of target their public service or their justice studies or whomever. And let's make an I'll take responsibility. They'll be in my shop. We'll have them here a couple of hours a day or full time, depending on the setup of the school. We'll have a relationship with the school. We'll all come to agreement about what this thing looks like, all put it together, and we're off to the races. What am I getting for this? I'm getting free labor, because with the intern or mentoree type thing, you can give them tasks and they're working on it. It might be mundane, but to them it's awesome. They're getting school credit for it. And you now have germinated your organization and potential hirees.
It's not only, getting the students interested, right? It's also for you guys being up on the times and making sure you're hitting on the points that these kids hear about trending, right? So how have you had to incorporate interesting topics into your curriculum? And you know where I'm going with this, Alan. You and I have talked about AI. So incorporating AI into security and getting it to a place where let's use this and not be afraid of it. Is this a discussion you're having in your classrooms right now?
I'll go ahead. Yeah, and I would say yes. Certainly, we have to embrace it. Technology is the future. Don't be afraid of it. The other thing you have to do is you have to bring some of the stuff into the classroom. These kids, the generation, they love technology. They're not afraid of it. They grew up with it. I think we talked about it, but I was using a textbook that was 23 years old. The students asked me, Saquella, what is a 35 millimeter film camera? And I laughed. They don't know what film is. And so I knew it was time to change the textbook. And so they grew up with the technology, and they're going to embrace it. I mean, think about what AI is doing for our camera systems, for intelligence notebook or I2 analyst notebook, different types of tools that we're using to connect the dots. Think about television and the old thumbtacks on a bulletin board with the pictures and the yarn. Well, that's all done now with software programs. And a lot of AI is built into these things, predictive analysis and so forth. So they're embracing it. They're excited about it. You bring it in, yes. To answer your question, that's a long answer. Yes, bring it into the classroom, give them some demonstrations, and bring in some real cases where it was used. I think this gets them excited.
BJ?
Most of the conversations regarding AI is, please don't use AI to plagiarize and cheat. It's like, you get the suspicious thesis paper that is magnificently well written and perfect. And, anyway, the schools are all going through some hellacious things trying to find a way to stop that. But, at the same time, like I think Alan just mentioned, proactive intelligence and predictive analysis is incredibly powerful, because, one of the things I miss about not being, if there was one thing I would miss about not being in law enforcement, it's that, at the end of my career, we were really going towards intelligence-led policing. In other words, let the data drive you to where the threat's at. But when you think about the AI application now, you can take every single thing, and I attempted to do this in the healthcare system and had a lot of challenges because of HIPAA and the regulations, but you have all these silos of data that are out there. And you could take AI and have it scrub while everybody else is asleep. AI is doing the work. There used to be a room of 100 analysts that were looking at information to find connectivity in streams of content that starts to paint a picture and trends and things that you have prediction. You have a forecast of what's going to happen next. It's showing you where you're really spending your money and wasting your money in terms of the outcome of stopping something. And so I'm very excited about where that's all going. And hopefully that instead of people being displaced by AI, it becomes tools in a toolbox for them to do greater things. And that they are the masters of AI because they're using it to exploit information, make things happen that we couldn't do individually because it's not fast enough. And so, just started having those conversations in classes that touch on the intelligence analyst aspect of, say, gang investigations or violent crime or terrorism. It's like the possibilities are endless here. I mean, we're on the frontier of application, and there's going to be the need for people that have the mindset to exploit the fact that they have a system or a thing that is thinking as fast as 100 people 24/7, never takes a lunch break, never has to go to bed. never has to pick up anybody from school. I mean, it should help our society in a number of ways that are fully unexplored at this point.
So my question is, and you kind of hinted at this, we see a gap in recruitment numbers with law enforcement. To adequately be able to do our jobs in private security, how vital is it in terms of being able to secure people and assets 10 years from now? How vital is it that we get more people involved in the industry? Alan?
Well, unfortunately, sorry, I jumped in.
Go ahead, BJ, go ahead.
Unfortunately, you can follow crime trends, for example, and we know where those are going. And so you have currently violent crime is increasing, property crime is increasing for a number of political and cultural reasons, but also the availability of law enforcement responding to those are diminishing, and that perpetuates the increase. And so we know where those trends are going. And the same analysis can be made with various types of fraud and some of the things that are happening in that space. And then when the attention goes towards corporations and down to whatever their actual businesses are, whether it's retail or warehousing or whatever, to follow those trends and to get ahead of them with this would be a great application. Natasha, I think I walked right away from your damn question again. Forgive me. So ask Alan again so I can answer it later.
No, you're good, Alan. So, the question was, how vital is it to pull more people into private security because the need for private security is increasing?
I would say it's very vital. And the thing is, one of the things that you're going to find out in some of the most successful police departments around the world, they've embraced the technology, specifically in the United States, those who have adopted drones, the technology that can pull information into and give you those types of predictive analysis with some of the big data, as well as some of the other technology they've embraced, is going to help supplement the loss of human beings. You think about back when, if anybody has an accounting background, when they first came out with this thing called QuickBooks, a lot of accountants were afraid they were going to be out of work. It created more work for them. The same thing's going to happen with this, with AI. But I think it's going to be our forces are going to be supplemented with the technology. And once we start finding all these things that we weren't able to solve for previously because of AI, we're going to have more work than we ever dreamed of. We're going to be uncovering more things than we ever thought existed because we didn't know they were there. So I'm an optimist, but I've always been that way. I think it's going to be a balance between technology and humans, because you're not going to get there when you got 400 officer positions in Phoenix and they can't fill. You better figure out how you're going to supplement it. And maybe with a mix of civilian and sworn officers. Some departments are going, certain types of cases are being handled by civilians, whereas others are sworn. So we have to be, the pendulum is swinging. The paradigm has shifted. We're going to have to adjust and say the old way may not work. We got to try something else.
So I guess my next question, because I think it bleeds right into it, is, not just pulling, and we kind of talked about whether we wanted to go down this road of conversation, not just pulling from the young professionals, but also how do you talk to a police officer who is done being in the government sector, had a bad experience, but we need qualified individuals in private security? How do we appeal to law enforcement and veterans to think about transferring to corporate? How do we enable and empower them to feel like they have the experience necessary to diving into this sector? BJ?
Money. And of course, that's what they want. Initially it's money. And then there has to be a sense of purpose. And so I think that one of the uphill battles or the difficulties is, we recognize this threat mitigation need in all aspects of our society and all aspects of our democratic republic and capitalism. All those things cannot function and exist without institutions being protected to be able to function as designed, to bring profit to their shareholders, to bring service to citizens, et cetera, et cetera. And so money is the thing that attracts them first, but the value added is that they're going to be making a contribution to something significant. So corporate leadership is still behind the curve on this. Security in all aspects is generally regarded as a necessary and unwanted burden or evil, whatever context you want to say it in. It's not a business line. It's not a profit-making line. It's an expense. I mean, I've spent most of my corporate experience and private practice experience evangelizing the necessity of this. And I have found certain things like getting with their risk people that pay the liability insurance bills and say, we're going to offset our liability insurance costs because we're now going to implement a physical and cybersecurity process to all of this. We're going to initiate a loss prevention process that's going to reduce on fraudulent accident claims against our company because people are setting us up for things that are false. We're going to reduce our loss from theft and fraud and employee behavior issues that result in us losing money, and try to make a case for people that are decision making that there's a bottom line here and that you're going to save X number of dollars. And if you were to put the cost in terms of what is saved from loss, that's the sales point, because they're the ones that have to be completely on board with this to be able to build the programs that are of value. The programs that are of value are the ones that are going to attract somebody that actually has law enforcement military experience to come to something because they feel that it's necessary. They have a requirement to do more, to lead and to develop new processes, procedures, technologies, whatever it is that's going to keep this threat mitigation model active and effective. And so it's going to take everybody to, and I would say in security vocation, to evangelize to companies that have to have these services, to public sector entities and agencies, the same thing of the value of this, and do it in a demonstrated way, bottom line and profitability. So we have a program that has value, so we attract the right people to it, and we're also putting in the money to attract people and incentivize them to come to work and to do a great job.
Alan?
I couldn't say it any better. BJ, you nailed it. Once you recruit them, you got to retain them. And in order for these guys to be successful, guys and gals, when they get over, they got to learn to speak the language of business. You got to have financial and operational acumen. You got to be able to sell to the C-suite, return on investment. You better get a working man's MBA. And so we have to put some controls and processes in place to help these folks transitioning, because it's great. We can hire them, but if they don't know how to sell what they need, like BJ stated, return on investment, and look for the low-hanging fruit, like he mentioned. We can reduce our premiums by doing this, or bringing this kind of money back, or taking on those areas where loss occurs that nobody wants to address. Guess what? These guys have security background, the investigative background, like where I came from. I had a $10 million budget. Guess what? I was cost neutral, because I went into those other areas, just like BJ mentioned. We reduced insurance premiums. We went after fiber damages and recovered from those who cut our fiber lines that were never touched. So you have to transition security from a cost center to at least cost neutral. And you do that by learning and understanding business. So that's how you keep the folks engaged. Get to learn that.
And I do think our industry is making great strides to providing that transition type, mentorship or even training programs. I know Carlos, Francisco, and Scott Walker are out there trying to help police officers transition into corporate. So look for organizations like that. If you're listening and want to transition into corporate, I'm happy to help you. I can put you in touch with Alan, BJ, whoever you want. I want to get an elevator pitch for college kids to come into private security. So Alan, what's your elevator pitch? Let's hear it.
You want an exciting career, come here and you won't get shot at. And it's also more lucrative, like BJ mentioned earlier. And once you get to a certain level, you won't be flying commercial any longer. You'll be flying in a commercial or a corporate jet. So come on over. We'll treat you right.
All right. Thanks, Alan. We hope you won't get shot at. BJ?
I'm containing my pitch because it would be too sarcastic. It's funny. One only has to look at like Indeed or LinkedIn to see the vacancies that exist right now in security. A lot of them are cyber. And, I know in South Phoenix, there's a really special school there. I can't remember the name of it. Alan might know it. They recruit directly. The NSA, National Security Agency, recruits from there directly because they literally just dig down in. They recruit kids that have this big interest in gaming, and they make them cyber professionals. And they proactively hunt in the dark world. It's amazing. And I just think that somebody that goes into that business, number one, they're never going to be unemployed. And two, it's exciting. And there's a lot of opportunity there. For people that are, I would say, more hands-on or visceral, I mean, the country needs you. We need you in our military. We need you in our law enforcement. We need you in our public safety. Do that first and then come to us once you have a little bit of that under your belt for the hands-on stuff. But the education is first and then the service second. But it's a tremendous career, something you're going to be thanking yourself every day when you pursue it.
Thank you so much to both of you for being here. Wealth of knowledge, both of you. And thanks to all of you for listening or watching. If you want to watch or listen to more podcasts just like this one, you can check it out on our website, tngdefense.com, Spotify, iTunes, or Podbean. Closing thoughts, Alan?
This has been a great career, and I would say that you need to look into it. Like BJ mentioned, there are so many vacancies and opportunities out here. And also, feel free to reach out. You can get me on LinkedIn, and be glad to provide anything that I can to you.
BJ?
Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. And I would say, to anybody that is interested in this, the true satisfaction comes from the fact that, at least for me personally, is preventing victimization. And you find out that if you had a hand or role in keeping somebody from being hurt or impacted negatively from the action of another, it's the altruistic, it's service, and it's the ultimate satisfaction. So thank you for allowing me to participate.
Thank you, and a great way to wrap it. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.